This is the Thursday, December 11th, 2014 meeting of the Zoning Board of Examiners and Appeals. Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Vig?
Here.
Mr. Karth?
Here.
Mr. Ron?
Here.
Ms. Eicher?
Here.
Mr. Hart? Ms. Dole?
Here.
Ms. McKay?
Here.
Thank you.
Moving on the agenda, we have no minutes before us. There are no minutes for approval. Special order of business disclosures. Are there any disclosures this evening? Seeing none, our next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. We have two resolutions for approval. Has everyone had an opportunity to review those resolutions? If so, could I have a motion to approve, please? Yes, Mr. Vig, you've indicated you'd make that motion?
I do make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Vig. Ms. Eicher?
A second.
Second, thank you. Would anyone like to pull anything from the consent agenda? Does anyone have any objection to approval of the consent agenda? Seeing no objection, the consent agenda is approved. Appearance requests, we have no appearance requests or unfinished business. We have no regular agenda items. Our next item is with respect to public hearings, item H. Before we hear our first case this evening, I would like to read the order of business for variance hearings. The chair shall introduce the variance and explain the procedure to be followed. The variance case number and the name of the applicant shall be read into the record. The board shall hear and rule on any objections to the sufficiency of notice. The board shall hear a brief staff presentation outlining the variance, not to exceed 10 minutes. On conclusion of the staff presentation, the board members and the applicant may then direct questions to the staff through the chair. The applicant shall then give his or her presentation, not to exceed 10 minutes. Throughout the proceedings, the burden of proof rests upon the applicant, who must convince the board by a preponderance of the evidence that the variance should be granted. On conclusion of the applicant's presentation, the board members and the staff may then direct questions to the applicant through the chair. The hearing shall then be open for public testimony. Each person has 3 minutes. Representatives of groups have 5 minutes. All persons who testify may be questioned by the board, staff, or the applicant. On conclusion of the public testimony, the staff, followed by the applicant, shall have the right of rebuttal. The board shall proceed to develop oral findings and conclusions with regard to the variance and disposition of the variance. The staff shall reduce the oral findings and conclusions to writing for subsequent adoption by the board at a later meeting. The matter then rests with the board, and the chair asks for a positive motion from the board. That brings us to our first case this evening. That is case 2014-0190. The petitioners, Jay Patrick and Brooke Corkery, are the petitioners here this evening? Indicated so. Could staff provide us with the sufficiency of notice, please?
On November 4th, 115 public hearing notices were mailed. 10 public comments have been received as of the time of the writing of this case, this staff report, all of which were in favor of the granting of the variance. No comments were received from the community council. The public comments in support of granting the variance, those all start on page 72 of your packet.
Thank you. Could you provide us with the sufficiency of notice, please?
Just that the notices were mailed and we received some responses, all of which were in support of the granting of the variance.
I'm sorry, Ms. McLaughlin.
Oh, the sufficiency of notice, page 3 of your packet, it reads community comments. On November 4th, 2014, a total of 115 public hearing notices were mailed. 10 public comments were received, all of which were in favor of granting the variance. No comments were received from the Turnagain Community Council.
Okay, would you proceed with your presentation then?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a request for a variance from the R1A single-family detached residential district to permit a single-family house residential structure to exceed the maximum allowable lot coverage in this district, which is 30%. The footprint of all the structures on the lot that count towards the lot coverage are 4,401 square feet, which is a total of 40.1% coverage of the lot. The petitioner is proposing to reduce the size of the second-story deck labeled on the as-built as a balcony on the south side of the house, reducing it by 76 square feet, which would bring the total lot coverage down to 39.4%. In regards to standard number 1, the standard does not appear to be met. The petitioner's representative states that the lot is oddly shaped with frontages to 2 streets, Forest Park Drive and the Forest Park Drive cul-de-sac, which make the property a corner lot and an oddly shaped lot. There are no exceptional or extraordinary physical circumstances. There is no exceptional or extraordinary physical circumstance of this property with a narrow interpretation of the standard, which justifies the granting of special privileges to the owner to be exempted from lot coverage requirements in the R1A district. Standard number 2 does not appear to be met. A strict application of the R1A district regulations would not deprive the property owner of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same zoning district. The slope and the shape of the lot, because there is a slope, do not contribute to the need for the variance from the maximum lot coverage requirement of 30%. A previous owner overbuilt the lot in 1983, and the problem was inherited by successive property owners. The owner who was responsible for overbuilding the lot provided a letter stating that they obtained approval of the building permit. However, that building permit there was no record of that permit located. If the variance is denied, then 1,034 square feet of the house would need to be removed in order to meet the maximum lot coverage of 30%. Standard number 3 appears to be partially met. Removing 1,000 square feet, over 1,000 square feet from the existing house is considered more than just an inconvenience. Standard number 4 is met. There are no structure separation violations. Drainage and runoff do not appear to be issues. This house is kind of on the downslope of the knoll in this part of in this neighborhood. There were no objections from neighbors, and there were letters of support actually from the nearest neighbors. Standard number 5 is met. While excessively large buildings exceeding allowed lot coverage can change the character of a zoning district, this property does not appear to be significantly different from neighboring properties when viewed from the street. The other houses on the block seem to be similarly sized. Standard number 6 is met. There's no identified health or safety issues with this property. Standard number 7 does not appear to be met. The property owners could remove 1,034 square feet from the structure, bringing it into conformance with the R1A lot coverage standard, or the R1A lot coverage maximum lot coverage requirement or regulation. At a minimum, the deck on the south side, the labeled balcony on the south side of the home that was added by the property owners, the current property owners, should be entirely removed. The deck is approximately 325 square feet. Removal of the entire deck would reduce the lot coverage to approximately 37.2%. The department finds that standards 1, 2, 3, and 7 do not appear to be substantially met and therefore must recommend denial of the variance. If after a public hearing the board finds that all 7 standards are substantially met, then the department recommends the approval be subject to conditions 1 through 5 on page 7 of your packet. The first one, this variance is from the R1A district regulations to allow a maximum lot coverage of 38% in the R1A district. The second condition of approval is a standard condition. The last part of it says, recording this approval and resolution with an updated site plan and a copy of the resolution. Condition number 3, department's recommending removal of that second-story deck on the south side of the house that was added in 2011. Condition number 4, establish non-conforming rights for the encroachment of the covered front porch into the primary front yard setback on the west side of the house, or remove the encroachment. Condition number 5, obtain an encroachment permit from the right-of-way division or remove the portion of the ground level deck that encroaches into the utility easement. And at the back of the packet, the petitioner's representative has already set about obtaining letters of non-objection from the affected utilities. There's just one more step left, which is to submit those to the right-of-way division for approval of that small encroachment into the utility easement. I'd be happy to answer questions, and the petitioner is here to make a presentation as well.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Are there any questions of staff by the board members? Yes, Ms. Dole.
I have a question relating to the percentages on the department recommendation. Number 3 is a requirement to remove the deck on the south side of the house that was added in 2011. And I wanted to know if that was factored into the percentage of 38% that appears in number 1, because I've heard a number of other percentages, including in, I think in number 7, it says removal of the entire deck would reduce the lot coverage to approximately 37.2%. And elsewhere, I thought I heard you mention a 39 point something percent. So I just want to be sure I understand.
That's a very good question. Through the chair, Ms. Dole, thanks for the question. On page, I'd like to explain and try and answer your question. Page 8 of your packet is a current as-built. Page 9 is the petitioner's proposed site plan. That would be to remove a portion of the second-story balcony, and that's because it encroaches into the front yard. That was discovered through this review. With what the petitioner is requesting, which is on page 9, the lot coverage becomes the sort of the top of page 4. The removal of 76 square feet would bring the total lot coverage down to 39.4%. So they're asking for approval of a variance for 9.4% to allow a maximum lot coverage of 39.4%. The department is saying that if the variance is approved, it should be 38%. That is leaving a little bit of margin for this unofficial calculation that we did with the municipal surveyor's office. That's at the bottom of page 6, as you stated, under number 7, point number 7. It says removal of the entire deck, which planning is recommending, would reduce the overall lot coverage to 37.2%, but we wanted to leave a margin for error. So the answer to your question is yes, it includes condition number 1 jives with condition number 3 recommended by staff. Yeah.
Thank you. Ms. Eicher.
Thank you, through the chair. Mr. McLaughlin, I just wanted to clarify my understanding. In the proposal on page 3, you mentioned that currently there's a pending building permit to add 184 square feet sunroom to the house, and then it's not mentioned any further in the packet. Am I correct in assuming that that sunroom is not being calculated and isn't currently before the board as a part of this variance request?
Through the chair, Ms. Archer, right. This was part of historic. This was. Yes, you're correct. The statement on the bottom of page 3. Currently, there's a pending building permit to add 184 square foot sunroom to the house. That's sort of how we got here tonight. The petitioner views this building permit as doing some structural repair to the south side of the home that was damaged by water. It's near a wet area in this part of town, and they believe that this is needed. The building safety folks call this the addition of a sunroom. I don't know. If I talk to them, the building safety folks, they say this is for adding more square footage than for a sunroom. I think the petitioner's application is saying that this, this lot coverage problem was sort of brought us to the need for a variance because they're just trying to do basic repairs, necessary repairs to their home. I think that in relation to Ms. Dole's question, it may be appropriate to clarify that in the findings, that maybe a statement in the findings that no new building additions that add square footage should be allowed. And a statement like that, clarifying for planning and for the public and for the Building Safety Division that should any future building permits be granted to make repairs to the home, that there shouldn't be increases in the lot coverage. And I can help work out some language for something like that, but a statement to that effect, I think, would help clarify something that could be confusing later on.
If I can, just one more follow-up question.
Yeah.
So the sunroom square footage, this 84-foot addition, is not currently before us. If we granted the variance that's before us and then they sought to add the sunroom, they'd have to come back for an additional variance.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, but a statement on the record would sort of help us with that. Yeah.
Okay.
It would just help because we'll put it in the resolution and then it'll stand for time immemorial because it's that's a small amount. Yeah.
Thank you.
Are there other questions of staff by the board? Seeing none, could the applicant come forward? You state and spell your name for the record, please.
My name's Dan Bowles, B-O-L-L-E-S. I am a representative of Patrick and Brooke Corkery. They're seated here, third row back. I am also here with the architect, Clay Porter, who can address any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Bowles. And you, the architect, and the petitioners all have a sum total of 10 minutes for your presentation. So if you'll keep that in mind. And again, we must find that all standards are met. So if you'll make sure your presentation addresses the standards at a minimum.
Yes, well, thank you. Appreciate through the chair to the board. We'll get right into the comments section there. We did contact the Turnagain Community Council, talked with Bill Wortman there in October and again in November. Unfortunately, their November meeting was to get new officers, and they didn't take care of any business that night. But Mr. Wortman, in my November discussion with him, that they considered the Corkery's variance to be a non-issue as a repair to an existing structure. And so they had no objection to it. As to the proposal portion here, this is not an addition of 184 square feet. The sunroom, as it's labeled on the plans, is the greenhouse that was put on in 1969 onto the structure. It is labeled the sunroom. This is building safety checked the wrong box on the permit. Mr. Clay Porter, the architect, has notified the building safety of that fact. They have since corrected their error on the permit. The permit no longer reflects that it's an addition. It is a repair to the existing greenhouse sunroom due to the dangerous conditions that are attested to by the inspection by Mike Woods, municipal inspector, in August of this year. So moving on then, and talking about the need to obtain an encroachment permit from right-of-way. The letters of non-objection have been submitted to this permit, the 2014 permit for this emergency reconstruction here, to allow for right-of-way to review that. If you notice on page 63, that right-of-way has no objections or comments. They have that information already, so that's taken care of with this permit. As to standards 1 or 2, the property is slope affected. There is a 16% slope in the driveway from the garage door to the street. That exceeds municipal standards for driveways. As far as other parts, they brought out there that the previous owner is responsible for this. Yes, they are. In fact, on page 23, you have the letter there from Paula Easley, who stated they got permits. And Paula Easley, being a former planning director, would know about the need for permits. It is not a big secret that a lot of the permit files and the stuff have been lost or destroyed over the years. And so just the fact that we have someone coming forward and saying, yes, I did get a permit, is about as good of information we're going to get from that time frame. As to the standard number 3, when we talk about the overage on this, under the non-conforming code 2155, this house was built prior to 1986, and therefore any house built prior to that, any setbacks or anything are automatically grandfathered because as-built surveys were not required. As to the front porch, the city code back in those days allowed you to go within 4 feet of the property line with an uncovered paved terrace, which that was. In 83, it became non-conforming, but with subsequent code changes, January 1st, 1986 became the magic date for setbacks. So it is non-conforming structure, and the code allows for it to be there. If they want us to go through that whole procedure, we can do it, but the code already says it's there. It's okay. Page 38 gives us the indication there that on standard number 3 that they say is partially met. They say they applied for the building permit. They knew about this. Well, on page 38, you'll notice that the box that's checked there for notification is not the owners, but only Alaska Tree Line Incorporated. So all communication, all the data that went back and forth between zoning and the building department went to the contractor, not to the Corkeries. They knew nothing about this. They thought they had a legal deck there, and it wasn't until after it was already in that they found out it was not legal. Subsequent to that, there's been a lot of things going wrong with the house, one thing after another. It's culminated now until they have to do the first floor wall down below. That has to be repaired. Second floor wall has to be repaired. The sunroom has to be repaired. And in the process, we found out that a portion of the deck encroaches into the side yard setback, or the secondary front yard setback. We have proposed to remove that 11 by 11 section, triangular section, and the 1 foot across the south end of that deck to bring it towards conformity. If you take a look at the photos that are provided from 1980, or, yeah, let's see, here we go, page 87, 86. You can see there that the old deck there with the decking removed, and what we have there, that little 2 foot bump out there, or that 18-inch bump out, that was taken off by the contractor. And then he squared off the deck. So basically what we've got here is that portion that was added to square off that deck. That is the means, that's why we're here tonight. That 11 by 11 portion, that's all. Because the house itself, as far as setbacks go, is grandfathered in. If it's over lot coverage, yeah, but it was done by someone else and not by the Corkeries. And so we would ask for your direction on that and a favorable response to this, this variance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowles. Are there any questions of the applicant by the board? And I do have a couple questions, Mr. Bowles.
Sure.
You said that the only reason we are here tonight is to address the deck, the 11 by 11 deck. That's why we're here tonight?
Well, that's what brought this whole thing forward. Okay. Yes, the house is 40% of lot coverage of the resized lot, but what brought us here was that deck. I mean, that's why we're here, is because it's over. In the application, because it is a non-conforming structure, I did not understand why the plan reviewer didn't first ask for a non-conforming determination to be performed, but instead in their review, they said, get a variance. So if we had been given any other option, we could have gone through and said, okay, in the plans, we'll take this section off that was added, and we will come back to the original shape and size of the deck, and we would have had a nonconformity determination. But as now,
excuse me, Mr. McLaughlin, is there any reason they couldn't request a non-conforming if I don't want to circumvent a variance hearing if you or the applicant so wish it, but
yeah, I mean, the definition through the chair, the definition of applying for a variance is that there's no other administrative option available. The first question when someone comes to the counter about whether or not they should apply for a variance is we won't accept an application until they can say that they're not eligible for grandfather rights, non-conforming rights for the structure. So one only applies for a variance when there's no other, you can't apply for an administrative variance, there's they're not eligible for any non-conforming rights. Last option, then you come for a variance. my understanding was that, Mr. Bowles, my understanding was that this variance application came in because the Land Use Review Office had determined that the house is not eligible for nonconforming rights. Are you disagreeing with that?
Yes, I'm disagreeing. That has not been the case. No.
Well, through the chair, if you believe that the home is eligible for nonconforming rights, then it seems that we could postpone the case and verify that that's the case, or I can delve into the code right now. But I don't know. This is a real head scratcher. I was expecting this to go very differently. The nonconforming section's 2155, but I don't make these determinations. It's another person.
And
I'll start looking into that.
I'd be interested in some of my other board members' comments, but we definitely want to err on the side of making sure that the following or the correct process is followed. And my first reaction is to consider what Mr. McLaughlin said, and perhaps we postpone while the issue of nonconforming rights is firmly established, and see if we need to go.
I would direct your attention to page 43 and the comments for permit number R142225, number 2. This is a canned response in the computer system for the plan review.
Okay, I still don't see how, I understand it's a canned response, but that doesn't answer the question of do we need, or do you want to see nonconforming rights established? I understand that's a canned response.
Mr. Chair?
Yes. Yes, Mr. McLaughlin.
So, thank you. So the code says existing structures with dimensional encroachments into required yards, which were constructed prior to January 1st, 1986, may continue in existence provided that the following requirements are met. An application for registration of nonconforming encroachment is submitted, and it's determined not to be a safety hazard. So there's a process to establish nonconforming rights. Staff report was recommending that approval for, recommending that should the variance be approved, that the property owner try and establish nonconforming rights for the encroachment of the front porch, the covered front porch into the primary front yard setback. You know, I can't, I'm not the person that makes this call, and I can't make the call here on whether or not the lot coverage issue would be eligible for nonconforming rights. That's as far as I can go.
And Mr. Bowles, do you understand?
Yes.
And is that something that you
So
would pursue?
The variance is on the lot coverage, and if they wish us to pursue the nonconformity determination for the setbacks, that's perfectly all right.
Okay, that's not what I heard. And maybe correct. We're here on the lot coverage variance tonight. And if you are saying that the issue of nonconforming rights was never established with respect to the lot coverage, the nonconforming rights for the lot coverage, that is something that I guess we would look to postpone to get clarification on that from building safety. So I don't know if that's something that you wish to talk to your clients about, but once we hear and act on this variance, the opportunity to investigate those non-conforming rights is not an option anymore.
Right, for the lot area.
For the lot area, correct. Is that something you want to discuss with the petitioners?
We'll proceed tonight. We will proceed.
So your request is not to look into the non-conforming rights and proceed on the variance hearing?
Proceed on the variance, right?
Okay, thank you. So with that, could we have any questions of the board, of the applicant by the board members? Yes, Mr. Vig.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Bowles, are you, on behalf of your client, prepared to accept the department's recommendations as presented on page 7? Should we grant the variance? In particular, I'm interested in number 3 about their recommendation to remove the entire deck and yours to remove a
Well, that's why we're here. We've submitted that we'd be willing to take it back to what it originally was before the contractor added that part on out there and extended it out into the setback. To take it back to its original, as it was when they bought it. That deck also serves as a secondary emergency egress out of the kitchen and dining room area. So it's not like it's, not needed. If there is a door out to there, and it provides egress in case of an emergency. The number 3, they would like to keep as much of the deck as they can. If they can't, then they would have to at least have some means to egress the kitchen dining room area out that way in case of an emergency.
So there was no egress from that area prior to the deck construction? And
Oh, no, it's always been there
okay.
since 1983.
Photos I have in my packet don't. It's hard for me to see where the door is. So
You can see, go to page 86. You can see the arched window with the doors underneath it.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Ron.
point of order for board members. Would it be possible for us to get full packets for ease of use?
Yes.
Who is missing some pages?
Yeah, the packet we have goes through page 19.
Do you have the original packet?
Yes, we have that.
The
but
cover,
just-
the cover shows
Just one
the.
second, Mr. Bowles. We, send it down there. We don't have one set.
No, they're not full. Okay.
I'm sorry. We can check.
So page 86, Mr. Bowles?
Yes. You can see the arched window there, and below it are the doors.
okay, thank you.
Mr. Ron?
Thank you, through the chair. Mr. Bowles, the sunroom that's been discussed, what's the approximate square footage of that? It's difficult for me to tell from the as-built. And it appears that, I guess the question that I'm driving towards is that repair is needed for that structure. And I'm trying to identify what role that structure has in the lot coverage question.
Okay, and as far as the lot coverage, it's included in the 4,401 square feet. It exists now. Part of it is cantilevered out, which is shown in Ken Lang's as-built there, and the rest is over the basement or the first floor. Looking at the picture there on page 86, you'll notice the 3 walls underneath. All 3 of those walls have to be repaired. You notice the sunroom or the greenhouse up above that was built in '69. It has to be repaired totally. A new roof will go over it. The interior walls and the side wall too will have work done to them. So as far as that 184 square foot or whatever's in there is currently in the calculation, and there's no change.
So for clarification, Mr. Bowles, the sunroom was part of the original construction in 1969 and not part of the 1983 addition?
Original construction was 1965, and the greenhouse was added in '69, and then '83, the rest of the house was added on.
Thank you.
Are there other questions of the applicant? Mr. Bowles, we have staff's presentation, and they've found that standards 1, 2, 3, and 7 haven't been met. Your response to standard 1 in reading the application, I'm having a hard time seeing how the odd shape of the lot lends itself to an increase in lot coverage by more than 10%. And would appreciate your response to that, because I don't see how the argument of an irregular shaped lot, specifically how the lot, it appears the house has been built to conform to that lot line, really lends itself to that argument.
Well, the standard that the property must have some peculiarity, which is not equal anywhere else, is almost an impossible standard to meet. That's even in the dissenting remarks in Thibodeau. So what we brought out are those things which are brought out by the municipality themselves, in that features of the lot concerning the plat, oddly shaped. Those things are the very things that the municipality in their page 5 and 6 bring out that you're to address. And so we did address those. There is a slope to the lot, 13 feet across the lot, and then from the driveway down to the street Ken Lang has there, you can note the elevation difference there. It's a 16% slope in the driveway. So it is slope affected. Maybe not to an extreme degree, but it is beyond the acceptable measure of the municipalities for driveways. The strip back application of this does, in this instance, constitutes an undue hardship. Because don't forget, if you're going to ask somebody to take 1,000 square foot away on a 2-story house, you just don't take away that 1,000 square foot from the bottom, because you still have that 1,000 square foot lot coverage. So when you take it away, you have to take both floors. You're taking 2,000 square foot. Half of this family's house will go away. So it is an extreme case. And as we brought out, this involves both hardship and practical difficulties that are beyond the owner's ability to control. It was built that way before they got it. It was built in 1983. We have the unusual ability to contact the owner at that time, and she has related she did get a permit. Can't prove she did, can't prove she didn't. She says she did. As a former planning director, I think she would know to do that. So,
And as a follow-up question, Mr. Bowles, assuming that a permit was issued in 1983, it sounds like that permit would have been issued in error because the lot coverage wasn't addressed then. And I believe you're aware from your experience that a permit issued in error
is null and void?
does not necessarily mean that the rights of that permit are granted.
Yeah.
So, again, how would you respond? If you're sitting on our side of this, how would you respond to that?
Well, we take a look at the time in which it was constructed. Go to page 11 and take a look at the aerial photo that was provided. And you'll see the subject petition site and about the lot coverage there. But then you go up one row of houses and you go down 4 lots and you take a look at that house. And you come across just next to it and directly east of the subject lot, and you look at that house. And you go over to Atwood Circle and look at the house directly east of the cul-de-sac there. This is not uncommon for the area, and it's not uncommon for the time frame in which these houses were built. The 1980s was very loose. Get it done, get it out there. It's the year building safety went over $1 million in fees, first time ever. Housing was going up, and subdivisions were going in. These things happened at that time. The permits were issued. So it's not an uncommon phenomenon for this era to find houses that are over lot coverage. In this area alone, just a cursory example, I found a number of houses that are hitting in the well above 30% lot coverage. So in addressing that, they did not create it, but they have the deal to be here and to try to resolve it. And they're offering to take the deck back to where it was the way they bought it. They have a certain amount of vested interest here. And as we know, when you go to get a building permit as a contractor or anything, they look at vested interest, how much time you put into getting the permit, how much money you've spent on materials. All those things are taken into consideration. But suddenly when we come to a family's home after it's built and in place, they start looking the other way on vested interest. There is a vested interest here, and to deny that, I think, would be, in a matter of fairness, would not be very good to deny that.
Are there other questions of the applicant by the board? Does staff have any questions of the applicant?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Bowles, it's a little bit confusing, the situation, and I just want to make sure that I understand it correctly. It's your belief that this house that exceeds the maximum lot coverage would be eligible for non-conforming rights and would become legally non-conforming if they applied for it, and that once they seek to enlarge the deck, then that encroachment would trigger the need for a variance for exceeding the maximum lot coverage because you're increasing the nonconformity. That's why we're here tonight. I think that's what you're saying. Is that correct?
Well, as far as the setbacks go, yeah, they've got grandfather rights for that as 2155.
Well, that's a different issue. So We've talked before this meeting, and we've had good communication all through this process. Thank you. That the covered front porch encroaches, and you believe that that's eligible for nonconforming rights,
Right.
and just need to establish those nonconforming rights. The encroachment of the deck into the balcony into the secondary front yard setback, the owner is prepared with the site plan provided to remove that encroachment. But on this very specific question, you believe that the whole house is eligible for nonconforming rights for its being over lot coverage, and really what you're asking for is to increase the lot coverage beyond what it is, which would be eligible for grandfather rights, increase it still further, and that's why no.
No, we're not asking to increase anything. No increase to the lot coverage.
Well, okay, so I'll just be plain that if you believe that the house is eligible for nonconforming rights, then I guess I would think that the case would need to be postponed to the next meeting. It could be, we can reserve 1-2 weeks from now. Of course, it may be hard because of the holiday, but say the next regular meeting, and you can seek to establish nonconforming rights, but and then you don't have to risk things here. And actually, that would be preferred, because then we would know what we're asking, what the request is. Can you explain that to me? I know that you have a lot of experience with Building Safety Division, and can you just speak to that? Because I'm still confused.
Okay, to staff through the chair, the nonconformity is to the setbacks.
Okay.
And we are proposing to eliminate that and take everything back to the way it was when the Corkeries purchased the property. And we're asking for that variance on lot coverage for that. As far as a nonconforming determination for the lot coverage, as was brought out by the chairman, Mr. Kars, I doubt if code enforcement would grant that.
Okay. So let me restate that the way I understood you to say it. The covered front porch, you just need to establish nonconforming rights. That's a condition of approval should this variance be approved. You're proposing with the site plan on that second page to remove the encroachment of the deck into the secondary front yard. The house you don't believe is eligible for nonconforming rights for its lot coverage, and should the variance be denied, then the Corkeries, the property owner, would need to remove a significant portion of the house in order to come into conformity. This is a variance for lot coverage, and you're not eligible for nonconforming rights for that. So you've got to get it approved here tonight, otherwise,
Right.
Major structural issue.
Right.
So we're on the same page.
Yeah.
Okay, I was confused by prior testimony. Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. Mr. Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. McLaughlin and the board, I'm a little troubled by the discussion as it's occurring here, and I'm concerned that the last statement by staff was in fact a position from the planning department with respect to a non-conforming rights determination for lot coverage. I'm hesitant to act on this motion in the absence of a confirmed position on that specific issue. If the department is willing to issue that in this forum, then so be it. And if not, I would recommend that as a board we act to move in that direction to get an answer to that specific question before moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Ron. I had asked the question earlier on as well, hoping that the petitioner would be interested in making sure we exhaust that question. But I believe what well, I think there's two things. One, we can, the board has in the past finished the public hearing, and at that time, we can make a motion to hear the variance, postpone, recommending additional information be provided, or we can continue the hearing. I'm trying to get my wits about me. It's a hard task sometimes. I guess, Mr. Bowles, if I realize there's a number of people here this evening, we want to make sure we get this right. And we want to make sure that the petitioner has every right to have their case heard, but we also want to make sure we as a board do everything right. And so we've asked the question of the petitioner, but it may be in the board's best interest to postpone. I'm not sure the timing of that, and it would take a motion of the board to do that. We have not opened it up for public hearing yet, so perhaps now would be the time to do that as well.
Thank you for the additional discussion, Mr. Chair, and I'm open to other board members' comments. I am happy to make the motion. While I do appreciate participation and attendance by everyone here tonight, the question to me changes significantly based on the outcome of what's at hand, and it may also change the nature of the public testimony that we hear. So in honor of pursuit for the answer to the question that I think we do need to strive towards, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to postpone at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Ron. And pending, could your motion include what you're hoping to postpone for, what we're hoping to get clarification on?
Through the chair, I move that the board postpone action on the variance request before us tonight, pending the outcome of resolution 2, the question of whether or not the structure in question is eligible for non-conforming rights for lot coverage.
Thank you. Ms. Eicher, you've indicated a second to that motion?
I do. I'm also interested in the answer to that question before we go any further.
Thank you. Mr. McLaughlin, you've indicated you're in the queue. Was that an old comment?
If the board will permit me, I don't want to detract from Mr. Ron's motion, but I wanted to say three things on a sort of a tangential issue. Mr. Kars is correct that you can hear everyone here, have the public hearing, close the public hearing, postpone the case until next month, and we can get back with additional information. And the board has the ability to ask specific questions of the petitioner. The public hearing would have been closed, but the board, when we return next month, can ask specific questions of the petitioner should they want to, and render a decision. Alternatively, you can have all the public testimony from the public present tonight, and then continue the public hearing to the next meeting. Of course, no one will have the ability to testify twice. You only get one shot at testifying, or one opportunity to testify. So those are two options. And it may seem funny why why staff was asking the petitioner's representative questions, but it's because I'm trying to remember what I was trying to say. That the applicant comes to the counter and says, "I'd like to apply for a variance." Staff says, have you investigated whether or not you'd be eligible for non-conforming rights? And they say no, and say, well, let me introduce you to these folks, and they'll help you out. Mr. Bowles has a lot of experience in the building, so I'm not sure if I, said that to him is my standard statement. The non-conforming rights folks, I think, work with the public, the people that write the letter for non-conforming rights, primarily Jillian Inglis. They will try not to have the public pay money or submit an application if they're not eligible for nonconforming rights. It's primarily, they do a sort of a quick look at the history, see that they are eligible, they go ahead and, make payment and apply, and it's the drafting the letter. And so that's why we're sort of stuck in this catch-22, where I really have to ask Mr. Bowles, did he, seek to establish nonconforming rights or not? But he's said that the house is not eligible for nonconforming rights other than the covered front porch. And previously, we talked about that deck not being eligible. So that's just information that I wanted to get out there.
Thank you. We have before us a motion to postpone in second. Could we have further discussion, if any? Is there any? Yes, Mr. Vague.
I would just say for the record that, if we were to grant a variance, it would continue into perpetuity, and like you said earlier, we want to make sure we get it right, and if it's something that isn't absolutely necessary, I think we should take the available steps to make sure that it isn't.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vague. Is there any other discussion? Yes, Mr. Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm trying to digest Mr. McLaughlin's two options as he laid out, and what I didn't hear in there was what I thought I had intended through my motion to close the public hearing. Well, I guess it hasn't opened yet, but to end our proceedings now, and part. So a question, I guess, through the chair to staff is that not an option before us?
Through the chair, Mr. Ron, that is an option. I'm sorry, I assumed that was a given because the motion was on the table, and I wasn't trying to, I really didn't want to interfere with the motion. Yes, there's three options that I can think of on the spot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ron. And yes, my preference, I intend to support the motion as well. I realize everyone's time is valuable, but I would like everyone to be able to make their testimony based on all the information that's brought before us as a board and you as well. So I would rather defer to having open the public hearing after everyone's had an opportunity to review the information. So I will be supporting that motion as well. Yes, Mr. Vague.
And for no other reason to have more time to examine the full packet.
Yes.
I would feel much more comfortable having that availability.
Thank you. If there are no other comments, please vote. The motion to postpone passes by a vote of 6-0. Yes, and the date of the next hearing would be just so I hope everyone can appreciate, we had no hearings planned for January, so we're inflicting the same punishment on us as anyone that would come back a second time, because if we have to hear this if we are hearing this on January 8th.
9. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm working off the wrong.
January 8th. And will we have that information in time?
Yes, yes, Mr. Chair. We'll permit me just a moment. Let's see. 15. Okay, so the next meeting, regular scheduled meeting, is January 8th. 2 weeks prior to January 8th, staff will provide revised report or packet, we're just going to start fresh. We'll have to provide a memo or something explaining what has happened between the two meetings, so that everyone's on the same page and this is clear.
And that will give adequate time to determine the nonconformity?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, so that will be we will hear that case on January 8th, this case.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your patience. That is our one and only case, was our one and only case this evening. There are no other items on the agenda. We have our reports. I believe there was one, there has been a request to fill our one additional vacancy, and there's been a notice sent out to the masses, I guess, not just for our board, but for all other boards. So we will see what comes of that. Are there any other comments? Any of the board?
I don't know if we need to make the motion now or probably at the start of January 8th, but to allow the staff and the applicant to have additional time to present. I don't know if they used it up there.
Can't hear.
I don't know if maybe at the start of the next meeting, one of us will need to make a motion to allow additional time for presentation by the applicant and staff, because I don't know if the time today counts towards their time.
Yeah, there's 2.5 minutes left of rebuttal, but there would be opportunity to ask additional questions of them based on the new information.
Mr. Chair, through the chair, Ms. Dole, thank you for the question. The time spent speaking now counts towards the time allowed, but it's very easy the way that Mr. Carr's explained it. The board can ask questions, and if you wanted to ask an open-ended question or whatever, and that's how it's handled, and I think that'll probably work fine.
Okay. Through the chair, is it possible to, if the board made a motion and approved it, to provide additional time?
So the only time I've seen something, a variation of that, is to combine two cases to give additional time for testimony, because you're hearing two cases, a testimony for two related cases. I don't know the answer to that question. Perhaps I could look into that question and then provide an answer tomorrow to the board via email.
Thank you. Are there other comments? I do have one other comment, and I haven't had a chance to read the update from the Department of Law that was in our packet. So my comment was I don't have any questions or comments to make, but I will next month unless someone else does. Yes, Mr. Ron.
Mr. Chair, I did have a chance to read it, I think, on a plane either headed south or north, and enjoyed the input from law, and it added clarity as hoped for, that I think I'd be interested in other board members' comments either offline or at the next meeting to help further guide me in my efforts to act appropriately, I guess, to not flower that too much. On a slightly separate note, in looking at calendars for next month, there's a chance I may not be in attendance on the 8th, but could potentially attend on the 22nd if we could push out, just for early awareness. I don't know if that's something we might want to look at our calendars to see what board's availability for that date on the 8th is.
Okay, and maybe we can do that off emails tomorrow, perhaps? Yes, Mr. McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Cars. I think that, so if we don't have enough board members to attend on January 8th and we push it to a later meeting like the 22nd you had mentioned, then the department has the ability to send out a notification to the public of the change. The 170 whatever public hearing notices, we can send notification of the date so that these folks would be made aware of that.
Okay. Would we do that, or would we just postpone till, and I wish we would have had this conversation 5 minutes ago, but January 22nd versus the 8th or the Thursday in February? I'm okay with either one, but
I think I'll be unavailable in February.
okay. Well, let's all look at our calendars tomorrow.
I had one question I'd like staff to have an answer to when we meet next time, and that goes to whether the department has lost or and what happened to permits that were issued when the one prior owner claims she obtained a permit, if there's a history of or known files that were either that no longer exist for whatever reason. I'd just be interested in knowing the answer to that when at the next meeting. Just thought I'd mention it now.
Thank you. I'll work on getting you an answer to that question. Thank you.
Are there any other comments? The last 2 times I've been quick on the gavel, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Ms. Dole and Mr. Ron, you seconded?
Yes.
Is there any objection to us adjourning? If not, we're adjourned.